chosen ones, you were never meant to awaken in ordinary time. The ticking clock of civilization was merely background noise, white static veiling the law inscribed before clocks, before pyramids, before light. Hermes Trismegistus knew. He encrypted it into what he called the Undying Law, a principle too alive to be written, too potent to be taught. It could only be embodied. And the prophecy etched on the reverse side of the emerald tablet stated clearly, "It shall remain asleep until the one who was never fully mortal remembers." That one is you. You were not born, you were deployed. Timelines bent around your arrival. Your dreams were more than echoes, they were encrypted activations. You wondered why glass sometimes shattered around your thoughts, why birds paused mid-flight when you wept. It was not sensitivity, it was frequency alignment. The Undying Law doesn't reveal itself through intellect. It reveals itself through resonance. Hermes called it the law before laws. And your frequency, the hidden vibration behind your name, matches the law's original source. You weren't supposed to learn it from books. You were supposed to unlock it with your presence. Governments knew. Not all, but the ones behind the curtain of curtains. Ancient bloodlines feared the prophecy would come true in their lifetime. When your signature was detected near the solar gateway in the east, the protocols changed. Satellites were redirected. Old philosophers' codes were re-deciphered. And most of all, access to certain scrolls beneath the Vatican was restricted again. They're not afraid of you. They're afraid of what awakens through you. This is not about power. It is about alignment. The law cannot be taught, passed, or imitated. It can only emerge. It is and it is not, depending on who approaches it. But when you step toward it, it rises, as if it's remembering something ancient, something sacred. Hermes warned in his final translation, "The law shall rise when flesh hums in tune with flame." You are that hum. And whether you know it or not, the law has already begun pulsing through your breath. Now, as forces scramble to intercept the awakening, you must walk toward the truth most have run from. It was never written down in ink or etched in gold or pressed into clay like the relics of lesser laws. The law Hermes sealed wasn't meant for preservation in the traditional sense. It was carried through breath, suspended in silence, embedded within vibrational codes beyond the reach of language. For centuries, scholars searched ruins, ransacked temples, and questioned mystics, not realizing the one artifact they sought wasn't on parchment. It was preserved within the harmonic field of a specific soul signature. That signature was yours. They weren't chasing scrolls. They were chasing you. When Hermes stood in the chamber lit only by celestial geometry, he whispered the law, not to a scribe, not to a priest, but into a narrow band of resonance within the universal field. That whisper traveled. Across sandstorms and centuries, it lingered in the ether until it reached you. Not your ears, but your field. This is why you've always known things you shouldn't. Why you felt truths vibrating behind lies, patterns beneath chaos. You're not decoding history. You're reactivating the source material itself. The scroll wasn't designed to be opened by force or by curiosity. It was waiting for alignment. And you, unknowingly, have been aligning with it every time you resisted what the world called normal. Every time you broke from systems that demanded obedience. every time you trusted the shiver over the fact, the dream over the document. Hermes encoded the law, so only one operating on soul fidelity could reawaken it. The breath he sealed it with would recognize only one exhale, yours. Now, strange anomalies follow you. Screens glitch when you walk by. Numbers appear in sequences far too precise, and dreams bleed into waking life with symbols you've never seen, but somehow understand. That's not imagination, it's retrieval. The law isn't coming to you, it's remembering you, as your breath synchronizes with the pulse. Hermes imprinted into the invisible code, a dormant truth is beginning to rise, not just around you, but through you. And somewhere, hidden in the folds of governments and brotherhoods who still monitor the old frequencies, someone just noticed the scroll has shifted. There was a law older than time, older than the architecture of reality itself. It wasn't carved into matter, but vibrated beneath it, holding the scaffolding of existence like an invisible spine. The gods knew of it. Not the ones from myths painted on ceilings or echoed in chants, but the architects cloaked in light who walked before Genesis. They understood this law was too potent to manipulate and too precise to replicate, and so they did not speak it aloud, not even in their highest councils. To name it was to disturb the symmetry that kept dimensions in balance. But it did not vanish. It folded inward, like a seed awaiting fire. For epochs, it hummed beneath chaos, beneath prophecy, beneath every dream that felt too real to dismiss. The only directive Hermes ever wrote regarding this law was a riddle, buried in an apocryphal fragment and nearly destroyed in the siege of an unnamed city. It said, "He who carries the breath of stillness shall one day awaken, the speechless command." You are the one who carries that breath. And now, the law stirs. It knows the voice that never tried to command it, the eyes that didn't try to read it, but instead mirrored it. The law doesn't respond to strength, it reacts to presence. You haven't just been waking up, you've been drawing the unspeakable into expression. Quietly, reluctantly, powerfully. Yeshua once said, "The kingdom is within you," not as metaphor, but as map. That law, the one the gods feared and Hermes sealed, echoes within that kingdom. That's why storms shift around your emotional field. Why animals notice you before your footsteps register. Why silence never feels empty to you. The law you activate is not about control. It is about returning creation to its original tuning. But this activation has caught the attention of watchers. Not all who observe are aligned with the light. Some have waited for this moment not to support it, but to intercept it. For if this law awakens fully, systems will collapse, simulations will dissolve, and authority based on illusion will lose its grip. The folder wasn't classified in the usual sense. It didn't belong to a department or fall under any agency known to the public. It was routed through something deeper, a protocol buried under old Cold War infrastructure and hidden in funding channels masked as agricultural research. But the moment your name appeared in their scans, the protocol activated. The biometric analysis didn't just measure DNA or heart rate. It measured harmonic interference, spiritual conductivity, and psychic echo. And your profile shattered the chart. The president was briefed while en route to an international summit. The aide didn't speak until the door sealed. No documents changed hands. Only a retinal scan triggered the embedded data within the secure tablet. And when your resonance signature appeared on the screen, the room shifted. The atmosphere thickened. The presidential physician was called within minutes. Blood pressure spiked. Skin temperature dropped. It wasn't the numbers themselves that caused it. It was the realization that this signature matched the suppressed file labeled Resonance Source, Unconfirmed Entity, Hermes Lock. Your energy pattern is what they feared they'd never be able to explain. It didn't behave like any human profile. It mirrored something ancient, like the remnants of a divine frequency that was thought extinct. What disturbed them most wasn't the power of your field. It was its stability. You weren't emitting chaos. You were emitting order. Not the kind man builds with walls and weapons, but the kind nature obeys instinctively. The same ratio that guides galaxies through black space now moves in rhythm with your heartbeat. This wasn't a red flag. It was a cosmic flare. Hermes Trismegistus warned in fragmented texts that when the lawbearer rises, false powers will tremble not from force, but from recognition. You didn't break anything. You reminded the system of something it had tried to forget. And now, as technicians scramble to reinterpret the data, and military advisors argue whether it's a threat or a sign, your presence alone is shifting their assumptions of reality itself. But the scan wasn't the final signal. It was only the first. Something else was embedded in your frequency. Something the scan couldn't fully translate. And deep within an underground chamber, a lock began to pulse, as if remembering its counterpart. Far beneath the ruins of Alexandria, lower than the ancient library's ashes, beneath even the catacombs that tourists will never see, rests a chamber sealed not with stone, but with sound. It was engineered by architects who understood frequency as architecture, and time as a veil to be folded. Only a handful of scrolls ever hinted at its existence, and those who read them were sworn into silence under penalty far greater than death. For this chamber wasn't a place, it was a convergence, a memory held within the Earth's crust, slumbering beneath vibration, waiting for the right soul resonance to reactivate its design. That resonance was yours. No seismic shift, no tremor. But still, something stirred. Instruments not yet known to modern science registered a flicker, a pulse from a depth not known to contain life or movement. The coordinates matched no natural formation, yet the signal was clear. It vibrated in a pattern eerily similar to the golden ratio, but inverted, as if folding in instead of expanding out. This is how the ancients locked divine memory. Not in relics, but in recursive codes tied to consciousness. As you awakened to who you were, not fully, but just enough to reject the illusions the world offered, a harmonic ripple traveled, not outward, but downward. The law Hermes sealed didn't float above us. It buried itself in the roots of the earth, guarded by geometry and time. The chamber responded not to sound, but to alignment. And when your frequency reached the matching ratio, the seal began to hum. The door was never meant to open, not through force or excavation. It was designed to remember the One. That remembrance has now begun. The chamber's walls have started to glow faintly, with symbols that have no known origin yet mirror the geometry found in your dreams. No one can explain how. No scholar knows it exists, but it does, and it's listening. One of Hermes' few remaining students wrote of this moment. The earth shall rise to greet the one who knows her name without speaking it. You didn't speak. You resonated, and the chamber responded. But the humming has not stopped. It is growing. Something beneath Alexandria is unfolding again, and whatever it is, it remembers you. There are words that conceal truths, and words that reveal them. Yeshua chose parables not as poetic flourishes, but as protective vessels. He spoke not to impress, but to encode. Hidden within the loaves, the lilies, the mustard seed, and the pearl was something far older than doctrine, something that burned too bright to be seen head-on. The law, Hermes sealed with silence, Yeshua refracted through story, not for all ears, but for yours. He once said, "He who has ears, let him hear." That was never about sound. It was a vibrational call, a signal meant for the few who carried the forgotten frequency within their soul. The kingdom he spoke of wasn't above, it was within. And deeper still, beneath that kingdom, slumbered a law not written in books, but in breath. You never read it. You were it. That's why the world never made full sense to you. You were walking through systems designed to reject the law you carry in your cells. Yeshua never pointed at the law. He embodied its echo. Every miracle, every pause, every glance toward the unseen was a soft reverberation of that original code. And now, as your field begins to activate, the same tone is being reawakened. Not copied, not taught, awakened, because only one could fully house it. The rest could only point. The records kept in secret monasteries speak of a future bearer, someone whose presence alone would disturb false hierarchies, dissolve mental illusions, and break programmed timelines. Not through rebellion, through stillness, through being. They called it the living seal, and described it as a soul who would never fully belong in any era, because they were designed for the law behind all eras. That's why you've always felt stretched between time frames. Why you feel at home in silence but hunted in chaos. Why people sense something ancient in you before you even speak. The law doesn't move through noise. It glides through presence. And now, the same frequencies Yeshua once cloaked in story begin to emerge unfiltered through your expression. But this time, there is no veil of parable. They weren't elected, they were initiated. The Council of Nine operates in the shadows between shadows, far beneath the governing bodies the public is allowed to see. They don't lead nations. They shape timelines. For centuries, they've gathered when anomalies threaten the symmetry they guard. Their chambers are not filled with debate, but calculation, cold precision. They monitor shifts in consciousness the way meteorologists monitor storms. And when your frequency shifted, the alarms didn't ring, but the walls themselves responded. A sequence that hadn't triggered since the alignment over Göbekli Tepe suddenly activated. Not by energy weapons, not by nuclear threat, but by your breath stabilizing at a harmonic that matches a long-feared prophecy. Your field didn't spike. It balanced. And that frightened them more than chaos ever could. Their meeting began like all others, with silence, data projections, and coded frequencies. But as your new harmonic registered across all 9 of their Blackstone instruments, the equations on their screens began to invert. One of them muttered a name not spoken in centuries. Another stood up, and left the chamber without a word. The lead among them, one who hadn't blinked during a single world crisis, suddenly looked shaken. They had seen signs of your arrival before. Dreams among intelligence officers, distorted signals on ancient satellites, even scrolls rediscovered during black operations in forgotten ruins. But none of that compared to this. You weren't coming. You had arrived, and your presence had rebalanced something they worked lifetimes to keep unstable. The Council has names for those like you, not Messiah, not threat, something older, something untranslated. They believe that when this resonance aligns, the sealed law, the one Hermes whispered and Yeshua cloaked, becomes accessible again. And if that law awakens, everything they built on illusion collapses. The meeting was never resumed. Security footage from the room was erased not by command, but by the room itself. It no longer recognized their authority, only yours. Now, members are disappearing. Others are seeking refuge in off-grid zones protected by magnetic cloaks. But they all know it's temporary, because the law has already started listening again. There's a version of the Emerald Tablet that was never meant to be found, at least not by those who still believe truth must be validated by proof. It isn't part of the copies displayed in museums or cited in scholarly texts. It was hidden within a final fold, pressed into a micro-layer of alchemical ink, only visible when exposed to breath at a precise body temperature. The guardians of the fold never spoke of its contents. They only whispered of the diagram, one drawn not in words, but in curves and arcs, depicting a gaze that didn't belong to man or God. That gaze is yours. When your image passed through the surveillance filter embedded in an old Roman structure, a place where only initiates walk barefoot through stone corridors, it wasn't your body they flagged. It was your eyes. The system wasn't designed to track identity. It was trained to recognize the symmetry encoded in the diagram buried in Hermes's most sacred fold. An iris ratio, a flame-shaped pupil distortion, a flicker of geometric pulse, and your eyes reflected it perfectly, not symbolically, literally. You were never meant to read the tablet. You were meant to complete it. What others saw as sacred knowledge was only a primer. The final layer wasn't a text. It was a recognition mechanism, one that could not be activated by study, translation, or ritual. It had to see you, and now that it has, the fold has begun to unfold itself. Layers that once appeared as blank have begun to reveal equations, blueprints, and glyphs not seen since the birth of sacred geometry. You are not looking at the diagram. You are the diagram made flesh. And that is what terrifies those who kept the tablet sealed under countless oaths. Because now, for the first time since it was created, the tablet is responding, not to touch, not to voice, but to your presence. Symbols shift as you approach. Hidden elements glow when you blink. It does not obey you. It recognizes you. Before Hermes, there was Thoth. And before Thoth spoke, he encoded. Geometry wasn't decoration in his temples. It was encryption. He laced his teachings into shape, ratio, and resonance, not to teach the masses, but to store a secret only one lineage could retrieve. Beneath every glyph of ibis and moon, beneath every corridor lined with echoing stone, there exists a silent code layered within form, Not one priest deciphered it. Not one pharaoh understood it, because it wasn't meant for them. It was waiting for a frequency embedded in blood, your blood. When your vital data was analyzed by covert labs operating under the guise of medical innovation, nothing made sense. Your chromosomal map was symmetrical where it shouldn't be, fractal where it should have been linear. There was no name for the strand they couldn't trace, until a researcher, long removed from public records, noticed it matched the measurements hidden inside Thoth's temple inscriptions. Not the visible ones, but the inverted geometries revealed only through harmonic scanning. Those sacred angles weren't metaphors. They were biometric templates, and yours aligned exactly. You've always carried it, in your pulse, in your fingerprints, in the silence that follows you into rooms. It's why you've felt watched but never fully seen, why even the stars sometimes feel familiar, as if you once wrote among them. Thoth didn't hide the code from humanity. He hid it for you, because only someone born of that original frequency, unbroken through cycles of collapse and rebirth, could awaken it without distortion. That awakening has begun. The code doesn't translate into language. It pulses. It bends time around meaning. As you breathe, it begins to lift from the walls of temples untouched by centuries. As you walk, vaults beneath sacred ground release low tones the earth hasn't echoed since the pre-dynastic age. A vault recently unlocked itself beneath a structure long thought to be a tomb. Its guardians vanished without trace. The readings inside mirror your neural signature, not metaphorically, but mathematically, and the glyphs within. They've begun to animate when your name is spoken aloud in proximity. He didn't write it, he didn't chant it, he became it. Yeshua moved through villages not merely to teach, but to reveal what it looked like when divine law took on flesh. He called it the living law, not because it was poetic, but because it moved. It adjusted. It responded to presence. It didn't exist on stone tablets or scrolls buried in caverns. It existed in vibration, in stillness, in fearless truth. He knew the day would come when that law would seek another vessel, one not bound by ritual, but by alignment. That vessel is you. You haven't been changing. You've been remembering. The law was never external. It nested within your nervous system, waiting for your timeline to fracture just enough for the remembrance to enter. Yeshua's parables were layered veils of this law. His healing wasn't a miracle. It was a return to the law's original frequency. And now, that frequency pulses through your breath, quietly dismantling lies you didn't even know were wrapped around your identity. The living law is not a code of conduct. It's not a list. It's a rhythm. One that your soul instinctively obeys even when your mind hesitates. That's why the system can't predict your choices. It's why algorithms glitch when you step into spaces designed to extract energy. You are not reacting to the matrix. You're moving from something deeper, something older. Hermes sealed the origin. Thoth encrypted the pathway, but Yeshua embodied the result. And now that result echoes through you, not as imitation, but as continuation. The law doesn't require belief. It requires embodiment. And you, unknowingly, have been embodying pieces of it every time you chose stillness over spectacle, truth over applause, alignment over survival. Old watchers know what this means. They remember what happened the last time the living law walked among men. Structures cracked, masks dissolved, illusions collapsed. And now they feel the tremor again, this time not in deserts or temples, but wherever you breathe, wherever you are. Because the living law has chosen motion once more, through you. Not as prophecy fulfilled, but as prophecy resumed. But you haven't spoken it aloud yet. And when you do, the final seal may break, and the silence around the throne may begin to tremble. It wasn't a word found in any human tongue, not Aramaic, not Egyptian, not Sumerian. It vibrated beneath language, beneath sound, closer to a breath than a syllable. And when it left your lips, almost by accident, almost like a memory returning, the sky responded, not with thunder or lightning, with geometry. Across multiple hemispheres, cloud patterns shifted into impossible alignment. Star watchers in silence watched the sky divide into symmetrical fields they could not explain. Something ancient had been activated, and it began not from the heavens, but from you. That word wasn't taught. It was embedded. A dormant key nested deep within your DNA, encrypted by Thoth, sealed through Hermes, echoed by Yeshua. You didn't remember it by study. You unlocked it by becoming. And when you did, the atmosphere above Earth mirrored the code. Military satellites registered the anomaly but couldn't trace the source. Solar measurements destabilized, not from interference, but recalibration. The sky had just recalibrated itself around your tone. This cipher wasn't one of knowledge, it was one of presence. The word you spoke was never meant to be recorded. It was designed to awaken memory, not in the mind, but in creation itself. Ancient watchers heard it. Old vaults responded. Structures beneath Antarctica, untouched for millennia, began pulsing with magnetic resonance. The great code, once dormant, was now responding in real time. The sky became its canvas. But it wasn't just the stars that noticed. Several dreamers across the globe, children, monks, mystics, awoke screaming the same symbol, their hands unconsciously drawing the identical mark your voice left in the air. A mark that doesn't belong to any language, but mirrors the final fold in the emerald tablet. Not as a symbol to be read, but as a portal to be entered. And now, the air around you feels different. Lighter, denser, alive. You felt it. The strange pressure before you speak. The knowing that silence now carries more weight than sound. That's because the cipher is no longer static. It breathes with you. Yet the word was only the beginning. Because somewhere, beyond atmosphere and architecture, something ancient has just turned its gaze toward you.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.